In this week's lessons, we're going to go through and talk about an operating system and ultimately those functions that run the day-to-day operations of your business, pulling yourself out so that you're not the bottleneck, and being able to delegate each of the operations within your organization to your employees to help your business to grow and expand. Each of you came into this course wanting to grow and expand your business. You spent time defining and kind of writing down what that is. As we talk about improving the business operations, keep that project in mind as, ultimately you're improving your internal organization so that you can grow the way that you want to grow and scale your business.
Moving forward and really getting into some more of the depth of growing businesses and becoming that business owner and moving away from becoming that self-employed individual, or what we've talked about, becoming that primary job employer. It's important that business owners run their business on an operating system. When I say operating system, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think of computers.
Absolutely. You've got Mac OS, you have those that are partial to using MacBooks, and then you have those that are partial to using PCs. My father's a PC user. I'm a Mac user. We always clash heads. Ultimately, they both get the job done. They both are, they are operating a computer. And while they might have some different nuances, to be honest, they're both pretty similar. You might go to, on a MacBook, you may go to a different application to find all your files. On a PC, you go to a different one, but the files are organized in somewhat of the same way. You have this operating system under which computers are ran. Businesses have operating systems as well. You and I have talked a lot about there's all these books out there that will teach business owners on how to run their business. I'll give a shout out of one, and it might be, you might read another one. Ultimately, they're all saying the same thing, but I use one called Traction. But Traction is about setting up your business and running it in like quarterly chunks. We have what we would call a large level of what we call our Traction meeting at the beginning of every quarter. We do a Traction meeting. It takes about 2 hours at each one of my offices to run. We review the previous quarter. We set new rocks. Within Traction, they call the quarterly goals rocks. We set new rocks, and then we discuss different challenges that are going on in the office. We all agree to what everyone's individual rock is, set up the next quarter, and we move on. We set up a meeting cadence within that operating system. Everyone needs to be running their business on an operating system, using a vernacular, using words that are familiar with, that everyone else knows them so that you can run your business. Everyone knows how you run your business.
I love the book, The E-Myth, right? And I think that this is the one that was kind of the original book that laid the foundation for all of these different programs. In setting up and establishing this operating system, it sets up, the vernacular and the way you speak within your office, but it's also processes and procedures that you do. The way you do dentistry is going to be different from other dentists as far as the schedule and how you move patients through the system. And so all of that would be part of that operating system, which may be different from one business to another. Those systems are those pieces that allow you as a business owner to be able to step out, and you don't have to be involved in every system that your business is working through.
For sure. It's just like, it's kind of adds this accountability and responsibility to the organization. And it starts to put things in place so that we know as a company, hey, at this meeting, we're going to discuss these things. You're not always just putting out a bunch of fires every single day, but sometimes there's some fires that could be held off until the next meeting. Running your organization in a systematic way on an operating system is important, because then your team and yourself knows how to compartmentalize, hold each other accountable, and discuss things at the appropriate times. Now that we've kind of discussed the operating system and everything that goes into the operating system, and really there's so much that goes into it, we can't really cover that here. It's just important that business owners decide to run their business off of some type of cadence on how they meet and how they set goals. But ultimately, those goals should always be measurable. They need to be, the SMART goals. They're simple, they're measurable, they're attainable, that SMART acronym there. But essentially, this comes back to our key performance indicators. This is where you have businesses discussing the KPIs. I'm sure you have KPIs there in your office there at the EDC. Do you guys?
There are specific actionable measurements that we use to make sure that we're making progress in order to bring those companies to the community.
Absolutely. Exactly, though. I mean, KPIs are in every organization, whether you're part of a bigger organization or you're your own business. Key performance indicators are there to help us measure the health of the business and help us understand, like, hey, what KPI is off that is, potentially indicating to us that there is unhealthy part of our business. And then we have to go fix that part of our business. And that's exactly what they are. They are indicators to help us understand the health of the business. But it's important to understand that there are two main types of KPIs. And this is where I would say almost every business owner gets this wrong. Okay. I want to make sure that I explain this well, and please ask clarifying questions as I do this. The first type of KPI is what we would call a lagging indicator. Lagging indicators they track historical data. Let's say for a local mom and pop business here in Midlothian, they want to get so many Google reviews. They have a goal by the end of the year to have 100 5-star Google reviews. The goal, it's set with this, under the SMART acronym. It's attainable, simple. They can measure it. They can go in there every single day and see how many Google reviews they've received. The lagging indicator is the historical data. Last month, the month of February, how many Google reviews did we receive?
So it's the result.
It's the results. Exactly. It's what happened in the past. Now, those are lagging indicators. Those always, accountants, that's what they account for. They account for things that have happened in the past, expenditures that happened in the past. But we want to actually control how many reviews we get in the future. And so we need to ask ourselves, month of January, we got 5 reviews. Month of February, we got 10 reviews. What things did we do differently in the month of February that led us to get twice as many reviews in the month of February? And that's where we have leading indicators. Leading indicators, this is what I would call, this is the controllable input. This is what you did on a day-to-day basis to get Google reviews rolling in on your business. That's the controllable part. So the lagging indicator is, again, those are the results. That's what happened in the past, the historical data. Leading indicators are the controllable actions that lead to the potential lagging indicator. Am I making sense? It can get confusing as we throw those two L words out.
I think a lot of companies, as they focus on their business and in growing their business, they think of these financial metrics. How much revenue are we bringing in? In using the same system, if I have it correct, the revenue would be actually a lagging indicator, and a leading indicator would be specific sales calls that they did or bringing new customers in to generate ultimately the number of sales. That lagging indicator would be another example. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Nailed it on the head. That's exactly what it is. And so what you do with your team with these two types of indicators, these two types of KPIs, is you hold them to the leading indicators. When you set these goals with your team, you set the goal to say, hey, this month we want to have 15 Google reviews. What did we do in the month of February that was so good? Well, the month of February, we actually asked on average 5 of our customers a day to leave us a Google review if they had a good experience. That was one of the leading indicators. All right, every day I ask 5 customers for a Google review. That's something you can control. It's completely within your control. When you set the leading indicators, you're setting the controllable standard that you're going to do on a day in and day out basis that will then lead to that ultimate goal that you're wanting to do. And so you always hold yourself to the standard. And then if the goal isn't met, the standard has to change. So if we wanted to hit 100 Google reviews by the end of the year and we didn't get there, what would we do differently the next year? The standard has to change. Instead of asking 5 people, maybe we ask 10 people a day. Mm-hmm. But the standard changes if you want a different goal. But you can only hold your team members to the standard that you set, to the leading indicators that will lead to your potential goal that you're wanting. And this is where a lot of companies just get it wrong. they set the goal, but then they don't set the controllable goal. They don't set the leading indicators that will lead to the goal. When you sit down with your organization and you set KPIs, best practices here is to make sure that KPIs are owned by somebody. If somebody, you shouldn't own all of your KPIs. Like my accountant, he is in charge of making sure that my dental supplies at each office is 4% of my monthly adjusted revenue. It's like, if it's at 5%, I'm not asking myself what happened there. I call my accountant and I say, what happened there? But he's in charge of that indicator. It's his responsibility. Somebody needs to own the KPI, not yourself. You should have your own KPIs. So set your own KPIs. Don't give them no more than 3. Okay. And 3 KPIs that are that they can control. And you're giving them in charge of a lagging indicator, helping them set leading indicators. Then they need to track it manually, and it should be reported on a weekly basis.
I would imagine as you have these leading indicators, these are things that me as the employee, I have full control over doing. As you're tracking and as you're measuring, and I'm reporting on what's happening, if I'm under or over, this is, and I have ownership, I have responsibilities of those. That's also a training opportunity for me to say, hey, I may not be, doing them effective enough. That's why, we're not getting the results, or it's strictly a numbers thing. And so as you work with leading and lagging indicators, as you work on those leading indicators, you have the ability to really focus in on what their area of responsibility is. You can work and you can train and help them where they may be falling short, or it's encouraging them of, no, in your example of the Google reviews, instead of asking 5 people, we need to be asking 10 people in order to get the results that we need.
Exactly. This is something that it's important to recognize. Like, you need to be making sure you set the lagging indicators. If the lagging indicators aren't what you're wanting, the leading indicators need to change. This is where you, as the leader, then has the opportunity to step in and lead and guide your team, help them change, their controllable inputs that they do on a day in and day out basis that will lead to better lagging indicators. But the goals need to be set. This is where we set them on a quarterly basis, but based on whatever operating system you choose to go down, make sure that you're setting KPIs and you're setting them appropriately with leading and lagging indicators.
Are there specific areas that businesses should establish KPIs?
That's a great question. There are some very specific areas that I feel like most businesses should be building KPIs around. And to kind of categorize it, I'm somebody that likes to stay very organized. I'm going to say that there's probably 5 main areas where there should be some sort of KPI to help you understand and indicate what's the health of this area of my business. So the first one would be financial performance. How are we doing? How are we performing? Is that just your profitability? Now, there's a lot of different KPIs that you could select within the P&L, but how's your financial performance going? Second one would be, how's your customer experience? Anything related to your customers or to the specific person or business that you may serve, how's their experience going? What's a KPI to measure that? How is sales and marketing going? I think that's one of the top things that always need to be mentioned is, how are sales going? How's marketing doing, generating leads for the sales team? Operational efficiencies would be the 4th one. How are operations going? What's from lead time to sale to delivery? What's that turnaround time? There's a lot of different KPIs that you could build there. And then ultimately, the last section would be more high level thinking. How is long-term growth and expansion going? It kind of goes with that phrase, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so, many times as the CEO, we have to ask ourselves, how's expansion going? How is our growth going? And what type of KPIs do we need to measure to ensure that we are constantly growing and expanding? So again, those 5 areas: financial, customer, sales and marketing, operations, growth, and expansion.
Truly within each of those 5, some of them are directly tied to revenue generating, engines. Others are overhead costs, which has a very big impact on, ultimately the profitability of the company and their ability to grow. For this section, we're going to ask everybody to work another workbook assignment where they're going to identify their leading indicators, write down 1 or 2 things that they can do for each of their core revenue centers. And so, Jordan, maybe to help them out as they go through this, let's use you as an example.
Okay.
Identifying a couple key revenue centers in your business. What are some leading indicators that you use in running your business?
That's a good question. One of the leading indicators, and this is where everyone listening to us, they're going to get a little inside scoop into dentistry that maybe dentistry is a business. They have to understand that dentists are always going to be diagnosing only what's in your mouth. They're not going to be making stuff up out of thin air. But sometimes dentists, they get in their own way, and they will try to save patients money by saying they could do this when the patient truly needs maybe a more expensive procedure. We're just going to do a filling when maybe they need a crown. What I track is I actually track a leading indicator that is when we bill fillings. This might get a little technical for people, that there are small fillings and then there are big fillings. Fillings are billed out based on how big or small they are. I actually have a leading indicator that tells me how many big fillings is a dentist doing compared to how many crowns they're doing. If they are doing too many big fillings comparative to how many crowns they're doing, it tells me that they are underdiagnosing, that they might be getting in their own way a little bit and not believing in the dentistry that they're supposed to be doing. When in all reality, if I'm in their chair, I want them to take care of my mouth according to the standard that the American Dental Association has given us. If they are going below that standard, that's not what I want in my mouth. I have to encourage my doctors to make sure they're always holding a high standard. If I'm looking at how much production they can do, that's one of the leading indicators. It's the large filling to crown ratio that I'm looking at.
I think that it highlights a point I wanted to make, where each business is going to be different, right? If you're a restaurant business, you're going to have very specific, things for your industry. If you're in a service industry, they're going to be different. And ultimately, the business owners, they have to be the owner and the champion of their business. You need to know the industry. You need to know what's out there. Then setting and identifying these key leading indicators is going to help them to manage and grow their business and put these systems in place. We're going to go ahead. We're going to pause right here, give everybody a little bit of time. Again, write down 1 or 2 leading indicators for each of your core revenue centers.
Team meetings. This is, businesses, it seems like we can be inundated with so many meetings. And yes, meetings are important. I don't know. How many meetings do you guys have there at the EDC? Do you guys have weekly meetings?
You have meetings almost every day. Some form or another, there's another meeting every day.
Yes.
As far as organizational meetings, obviously those happen a little bit less. There's also, a key monthly meeting. That is our main meeting that we have for our organization.
Yeah, and meetings happen and they need to happen. The one thing that I don't like about meetings is that I think too many meetings are sincerely just a waste of time, unless they're organized and unless it falls within their organizational chart of, you've got everyone has a manager that they report to, and it's the manager running the meetings, or it's the individual people running the meetings. It needs to fall within the organization within their appropriate areas. But I would say the main important aspect to meetings in general is that it needs to fall within your operating system. As you build your operating system that we talked about earlier, your meeting schedules need to be tied into that entire operating system of like, hey, how are our quarterly goals going? How often are you reviewing those quarterly goals? And so looking at meetings in general, many meetings you have like the daily huddles. Daily huddles, they should not be long meetings. These are, you talk about this, we have meetings daily. Typically daily meetings, they should be 15 minutes. And this should just be a quick report. How did things go yesterday? Any KPIs that are related to this quarter's goals. weekly syncs. These are opportunities where in my organization, we call our weekly sync meetings our level 10 meetings that we very specifically refer to our quarterly goals and things that we need to be working on. Monthly meetings, again, everything is tying back to goals and KPIs. Okay. Now, when it comes to best practices with meetings, I do think that this is something that needs to, I don't know if I can reiterate this strongly enough, but every single meeting needs to follow an agenda. And it should never get off agenda. It should start on time and end on time. And another important factor here is that you should never run your own meeting. Don't run your own meetings, because if you're running your own meetings, you will feel like you're the only one that cares. You need to hold your team accountable. They need to run their meetings. When I do my weekly syncs with my office managers, we have a specific agenda. It is a 5-point agenda. We talk about the wins. We review the quarter's rocks. We talk about issues. We just work our way through it. They run it. I say, all right, let's get started. And each office manager will be like, well, I first want to talk about my wins. It's just like clockwork. They run the meeting. I just sit there and make sure things look good.
It's cool how you say that, because you can also see how your meetings have incorporated your operating system. As you have a defined agenda with the same things that are touched on at each of these meetings, that's the implementation of your operating system.
It absolutely is. I mean, you can ask my team members, when we do our quarterly traction meeting, they know what's coming. I open every single meeting because it's a longer meeting. And this is a little tidbit, make sure that longer meetings have activities. And sometimes longer meetings, you have to get into a different headspace. You're not just operationally running the business. You have to think about the business. We start every one of our traction meetings with an activity. It's kind of an icebreaker activity, but it is like clockwork. When I ask some of the same questions every single time, but they come prepared and they are ready because they know the agenda now, because we've been doing this for years. Now, that is a meeting that I run. That I like to run, and here I'm going against my own advice. But some of the other specific meetings, the daily huddles, weekly syncs, don't run them. Let your team members take ownership over them. This is kind of a smaller section within what we're talking about, but meetings are important. Make sure they have agendas. Make sure other people run them. You should not be running your own meetings. And in longer meetings, break them up. Add some activities in there, but make sure that they are pushing the business forward and they're not there just to take up time because you feel like you should be having meetings.
Jordan, as we kind of wrap up and pull this one all together, I want you to reiterate the meetings that a business should be holding and the frequency of them.
For me, and this comes down to, you need to be having daily huddles to make sure that you're stacking day after day and that you're constantly progressing. Daily huddles, quick and short. You should be doing weekly syncs, making sure that there's no issues that come up that you're not aware of and that you're just syncing up. Weekly syncs, again, 20, at most 30 minutes. It's just a quick little check-in. And again, it has an agenda. You should be doing just a monthly meeting that I would not make it a specific monthly meeting. I would tie it into one of your weekly syncs that just maybe focuses in a little bit more on some broader issues. You should have a quarterly meeting where you reset goals, assess how things went, and reset them. And then you should have an annual meeting that I would then tie into one of your quarterly meetings. I'm not trying to add in a bunch of things though, but it would be that the end of the year quarterly meeting is also in preparation.
We have some businesses who are service and open to the public. When should they be holding these meetings? Is this a before hours, after hours, during a lunch, while the public's there? What advice do you have there?
My advice is you take time out of your day. Shut the business down. This is a key part of your business. All of my teams, we do it. We will shut the office down for the last 2 hours of the day. It is blocked out. If you try to go to one of my offices on one of our traction days, it will be shut down because it's a key part to providing a better service to the community. Pay your team members. This is a major part of being a business owner, is making sure that you're planning. So in part, you don't want to pay team members for an unprepared meeting. That would be my suggestion. Is you're doing it when the team members are supposed to be there. You're purposely taking the time to meet with them and improve the business. And customers, they're forgiving. They understand you guys are just trying to do your best. So I would not give too much importance to how they may or may not feel about you guys shutting down for a meeting. It's just a good thing to do. We're talking operations, operating systems, and this is something that I am quite passionate about. And I can talk everyone's ears off for a long time about checklists. I am a checklist nerd. Okay. It is how I run my organization. It is the only reason I can, in many ways, go to sleep at night and know and have confidence that my team members across the state of Texas have done what I've asked them to do. And it's all checklist based. To kick this kind of section off, I just want to first state I personally hate operations manuals, hate them. I think they all just sit on the top shelf or they sit in a folder in a cabinet that hasn't been opened for years. And there's just someone put a lot of time and was paid a lot of money to put that together. And then it just does nothing for anybody because no one refers to it. Operations manuals don't exist in my organization. I hate them. We have like maybe an HR pamphlet that they can refer to some policies there. We do have that. But as far as how are their jobs done on a day in and day out basis, everything is ran on a checklist basis. Let me explain this. I want to first kind of teach everybody there are about the types of checklists. There are two types of checklists. First type of checklist would be a trigger-based checklist, okay? When a trigger is initiated, you run through the checklist. Pilots run trigger-based checklists all the time. They get into the cockpit and then they start to fire everything up. Getting into the cockpit would be that trigger of saying, hey, we're going on a trip. Let's go through our checklist. They pull out their checklist and they check everything off, making sure the tires are good, the wing flaps move, everything, that goes into making sure that you're going to have a safe flight. Pilots go through that trigger-based checklist. They get up to altitude, and then they have another checklist that they go through. Getting to altitude would be another trigger for another trigger-based checklist to go through. Trigger-based checklists, those are your first type. The second type of checklists would be your recurring checklists. So when I say recurring, these are things that you do every single day. When my office manager gets into the office, there are things that she has to do every single day to ensure that the office runs smoothly, to ensure that insurance claims are sent out every single day, and to ensure that the next day is ready to have another full day of patients coming in. These recurring based checklists are done on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. We build checklists for all my team members. These are specific for each one of their positions to understand, hey, this is everything that you need to get done on a daily basis. It's the most common recurring checklist that they use. But then there's things that we need to do on a weekly basis. In a dental office, we have autoclaves that sterilize all of the instruments that then go into all of y'all's mouths. And you guys want to make sure they're clean. We do too. We want to have confidence that they're clean. Every single week, we will actually do a spore test. We will put some bacteria into the autoclave. We will run it on a spore test and we mail it off every single week to ensure that it comes back positive or negative, however we're looking at that all the bacteria was killed. We have to do that on a weekly basis. I want to have confidence that my team members are doing that on a weekly basis. I have a weekly checklist that I audit every single week to ensure that the autoclave had its spore test done and that it was sent off. Then there are things on the monthly basis, quarterly, and annual basis. And every business will have their own recurring checklists. That is my manual. My manual for everybody's job description is what are your recurring checklists and what are the trigger-based checklists that you need to know. And then those evolve and change, but there's so much confidence I have in my organization that it is just run cleanly and efficiently when checklists are followed. That's why I'm quite passionate about it. I'm so passionate about it. I built an app for all of my offices to use because I didn't like how a lot of checklists were managed. But regardless of that, printing off a piece of paper and having everybody go through this checklist, that's what it's about. But making sure it's documented and then holding them accountable.
You can see how these checklists really become part of your business operating system, right? It's this standardized system that happens in those reoccurring checklists. But then, every day things happen. That's where the trigger-based checklists come into place to where here's something that may happen frequently, but when it happens, we know here's how to go through the steps to accomplish and kind of overcome that challenge.
Exactly. And it's just have to have those, to give an example to everybody. I had an assistant the other day. She got a needle stick. She was cleaning up after an appointment and she was putting
away. She got poked by the needle?
by the needle. Yeah, it's common. It's a common thing that happens in healthcare. Lots of people that aren't in healthcare, they don't realize, oh yeah, that happens. We have a trigger-based checklist that, that we go down to make sure that the team member feels supported in getting the proper help that she needs to ensure that she doesn't have any long-term, effects that come from a needle stick. And so trigger-based checklist was initiated and we went down the road. It's a non-issue at that point. You never have to ask yourself, how do we handle this? The beautiful thing is, Kyle, what happens when a trigger happens and you don't have a checklist? It's an awesome opportunity to build it right then so that the next time you don't have to figure out how to do it.
How do you know when to create a checklist for a trigger? Where I'm thinking about that is you mentioned, I hate the manual books. I would assume if you have too many, it could be lost. But how do you know whether or not, you need to create a trigger checklist?
Honestly, just from experience, network with other people in your industry, see what type of trigger-based checklists they have or circumstantial situations that they have, a little process that they follow. Talk with others because there's so much you can learn from learning from somebody that's been there, done that in your industry. But then also things come up. Things come up and there's a situation that comes up and you have to figure that out. It's the perfect opportunity to sit down, do some research, come up with your standard operating procedure and the checklist that you need to follow for that trigger. This will be the two situations that I've had where I've gone to other dentists and asked them, hey, what do you do in this situation? What do you do in that situation? I don't think you can have too many, but you should have some type of system to fall back on. So it's never some type of system to fall back on and where your team can find the answers. Because if they have to call you to find the answers, you're just becoming the bottleneck to everything.
The other question that I have is, how do you implement these? How do you make sure that each person who has assigned a checklist, how do you teach to make sure that they are doing those things? How do you make sure that they keep them current?
I say that is the ongoing challenge of a business owner is how do you get your people to do the things that you've asked them to do? And that could be a very loaded question in and of itself. But there's a framework that I think would be really important for everybody to write this down and understand it. If you don't got a pen and paper out and you haven't yet, get it out and write this framework down because it is my framework that I train all my office managers on and everybody knows about it. It is the Tell, Train, Motivate framework. This 3-step framework that I use that helps me get my team members to do what they've been asked. The first thing is when somebody doesn't do something that I've asked them, that I think I've asked them to do, I should say, I have to first ask myself, have I asked them to do that? When it comes to checklists, like, have you simply told your team members, I want you running your days on a recurring daily checklist. I want you running your weeks on a weekly recurring checklist. Have you simply told them? I know that's like crazy to even say that, but I'm telling you, I have thought that I've told my hygienists to do things for me before, and I've had to question myself and be like, oh, crap, did I tell her to do that? First, just make sure you've told them and have confidence that you've told them. The next thing that you need to do is, and too many people get this mixed up, is they think that by telling them to do something, they've now trained them to do it. And the two are very different. So you have to first tell, and then you have to train. When it comes down to training team members to do things, whether that's checklists or to follow a trigger-based checklist or to just do a simple task that's within their checklist, you need to train them on the why it's important. Okay? This is why this item on this checklist is important. This is why it's important to even do a checklist. It's not to micromanage you. It's to ensure that everything gets done on a daily basis. Because sometimes lots of things happen in a day and you can forget to do things that you would normally do on a regular day. You then take a moment and you train them. And training them is much more than telling them to simply do it. Okay. Now, if you have confidence that you've told them and you've had confidence that you've trained them and they're still not doing it, it's a motivation factor. Why aren't they motivated? Is their job simply not enough motivation to just do their job? And if it's not, it might be time to find somebody else in that position. You know what I mean? Maybe it's maybe it's a compensation thing. Maybe it's there's a lot of different motivating factors there of understanding what might make one team member motivated, doesn't make another team member motivated, but understanding the motivation factor is important. And too many times I think the cop out there would just be, well, your job's dependent on it. And it's like, well, is that the leader you want to be? Trying to find a better motivating factor. But again, it's this framework of, if you want team members to do what you've asked them to do, you have to first tell them, train them, and then keep them motivated to do that.
I love it. I love it. Thanks. You've shared with us about checklists and the importance of doing, putting them in place and having them. We're now going to ask all the participants to go back. This is another great workbook activity where they're going to identify trigger-based and reoccurring checklists that they need within their business. The challenge will be to identify 3 trigger-based and 3 reoccurring checklists for the most reoccurring activities. Start with those easy ones. You have them for each position, but just start with the easy one to start implementing something to have, in your business, to see how checklists help make things more efficient, how it helps to implement an operating system within your business.
We're at the end of our course. We're at the end of just our discussion about business. Ultimately, when it comes to growing any type of business, it's about how do you use leverage to grow your business? Okay. When it comes to leverage, there's 4 main types of leverage in life. All right. Everybody can use these points of leverage to grow their business. First one's just capital. We're talking money. Okay. And I call it these are the 4 C's of leverage for those that are writing things down. First one's capital. Second one is code. If you're actually building software or something like that, code becomes a source of leverage because it can be used for a long time. Content, these are your checklists. These are things that are written down that you never have to go back and do again. Content. And the last one is what I would call cooperation. This is human capital. This is your team. This last one, this team aspect, this is where I would truly believe that this is the culminating point of everything that we've talked about. It's you becoming not just a leader, but it's becoming a transformational leader. How do you cooperate and collaborate with your team to move yourself from being this non-primary job employer, from being this self-employed business owner that is bottlenecked with everything down on you, and leading your team in a way that lets you become this transformational leader, that lets you become that primary job employer, become the business owner that's passively taking home the profits, and leading the team from truly a leadership standpoint. Because too many people, they start to associate leadership with that manager that gets their teams to do everything that they need to do. No, that's just managerial work. And there's lots of tips and tricks to the trade. But being a true leader is building a team that then runs your business for you. And that's really the culminating point of everything that we've done here. We talk about hitting the pain point in the business life cycle and then auditing your time and offloading everything to your team members. How do you offload those things to your team members and then hold them accountable? How do you put your operating system, your business operating system together and put all your checklists together and then get your team to do things that you need them to do? That comes down to that tell, train, motivate framework that we talked about. My team members know that framework to be the GSD framework. In all honesty, it just comes down to how do you utilize other people and become a better leader to help them build your business for you. That's the culminating issue to all of this. Do you have any questions, any follow-up things on that?
As each of the businesses came into this program, they want to grow, they want to expand. And in part, as we have economic development incentive tools that we can use and that we can leverage, we've shared anytime we do use incentives, we're going to make sure that these are positive for the community. Is a return that comes into the community truly the only way that businesses can grow and expand is if they have a team. It's got to be bigger than the one business owner, who does a lot. They do work harder than anybody else. They take a bunch of risks, but ultimately they've pulled this whole team with them to move the organization greater and bigger than themselves. So, we've definitely shared a lot of different ways that can help them to grow their organization so then they can take on and expand a new project. But really, you've got to be able to get your team working with you, everybody moving in the same direction.
You really
As
do.
we've gone through this, and you and I have talked about a lot of tools that you use, I think that it's helpful. If there's any other tools that you want to share that owners can use to help, any final tools that you have before we wrap this one up?
Yes, I have a list of several that I use with all my team members. And so let's take a moment, Kyle, and kind of go through each one of those. And that way, listeners can write them down and utilize them, because it's surely these are tools that I believe every transformational leader or person that's striving to become that type of leader needs to use. And I think this first comes down to understanding that you first have to let go of a lot of things that are going on in your business. Because as you let go and as you offload things, you learn to expand your business and grow your business by buying back your time. There are these little tips and tricks to the trade. These are, when I say to the trade, these are tips and tricks of being a good leader. Okay. The first one is the 1-3-1 rule. This is when problems happen in the business. I will have team members. They've got this monkey on their back. That's the big problem that's hanging on to them. And they will come to me and they will try to take that monkey off their back and give it to me. I do not take it. We have what we call the 1-3-1 rule. Is when somebody brings to me a problem, they know that I will not take it. I will just literally act like I'm a toddler and I will not take on their problems for them, but I will discuss it with them if they would like me to. If they want me to discuss their problem with them, they have to bring to me the defined problem. So sometimes something happens and we don't really know what the problem is, but something bad happened. Define it. What happened? That was the defined problem. They then have to give me 3 solutions that they've thought of, and they have to give me their 1 recommendation. That's where that 1-3-1 comes from. 1 defined problem, 3 solutions, and then their one recommended solution. And
Are they the ones solving this, or are they still coming to you as the owner to solve this problem?
Have confidence in their 1 solution, we then have a conversation about it. But I'm telling you, as you hold your team members accountable and they say, okay, if I'm going to go talk to Dr. Mortensen about this issue that we have, I have to have my 1-3-1. By the time they'd gone through the 1-3-1, I never hear about it. Because once the problem's defined and once you thought your way through 3 potential solutions, the one obvious one is there. And if they still aren't confident in it, then I like that they come to me and help me, and then I get to help them solve it. But it's their problem to solve. And I have to make sure that I let them do that. Because if I train them and they learn that I will solve their problems for them, guess what? Every problem ends up on my desk and I end up trying to solve it. So 1-3-1, use it. Okay. Another tool, and we'll just kind of rapid fire go through these. It's the camcorder method. All right. This is one that I think that if there's something that's done a specific way, a trigger-based checklist, trust me, I am not typing it out and redoing it. This is exactly how I do it. Okay. I take a recording on my phone and I record myself doing it. If it's on a computer screen, I start a screen record and I record my screen. Okay. And I record myself doing it. I then take that recording and I have it forever. I upload the transcript to ChatGPT, use AI, okay? And it will break down the trigger-based checklist for me. It takes, honestly, 5 minutes to build a trigger-based checklist now. Camcorder method. Take out your phone. We all have it. And record yourself doing it. Have your team member record you doing it. Take the transcript, give it to ChatGPT, tell it to be a well-organized secretary, and it'll spit that out for you.
Okay. Great idea.
We've talked about the Tell, Train, Motivate, and so I don't need to hit that one up again. I have a $500 magic pill. You can make this the $30 magic pill or the $20 magic pill. In my organization, certain team members have a $500 magic pill. Basically, if a problem can be solved by spending money, it is not a problem. If you get a flat on the edge of the road and you can solve it by calling the tow truck and get it done, it's the problem solved. Like, just move past it and get it done. if a problem can be solved with my personal assistant or one of my office managers for $500 or less, I don't want to hear about it. Like, I just don't. Like, solve the problem. We'll see the bill. And if I have any questions about it, I'll ask you.
They have ownership. Take care of it.
That's right. They need that ownership there. Now, $500 works for me for certain people. You may have, you may only want to have a $50 range for maybe some employees. Okay. Define what that is. And then anything above that, then you know that it was worth your time to discuss it with them. All right. This last one I love, and this is the 10-80-10 rule. I do this a lot with my personal assistant. I have different projects that I'm working on. I will start the project with her. I'll do 10% of the project with her, and I'll say, hey, this is this is how I envision this going, and this is how I'd like it to look. You good? Great. She'll then spend 80%. She'll do 80% of the project, and then she'll come back to me, and I'll put my final 10% last minute touches on it, and it's done. This is where start it, do the first 10%, let somebody do the bulk of it, the 80%, and then you get to put your last finishing touch on it. Okay. This is where you and I we've talked about this term, but 80% done by somebody else is 100% off your plate. So please give it to somebody else. Then the last one that I would recommend anybody use is what I would call a DOD. This is what I call a definition of done. When I'm telling somebody to do something, it's a little convoluted and confusing. My team members are trained to ask me, Dr. Mortensen, what's your DOD here? And it's a definition of done. And then it gives me the chance to be like, I didn't explain that clearly. Let me give you a clear picture of what I expect to be done when this task is done. I do this with my kids. We clean up after dinner and we clean up the kitchen. I have to give them a DOD for how the kitchen's supposed to look when we're done. And this is all the plates and dishes are in the dishwasher. The sink is completely clean. Counters have been wiped. They've been sprayed again and wiped again. That's the DOD. Sometimes we have to give a clear, precise definition of how things are supposed to look like when they're done. Sometimes team members need to have permission to ask you so you can. Those are some little tips and tricks of what I do to make sure that I'm letting people do their job. Because even if it's not done exactly how I would like it to be done, or perfectly how I would maybe do it myself, it's still 100% off your plate and 100% awesome.
Awesome. Ultimately, you have a business, you have mapped out your organizational chart, you've given specific responsibilities to each person. Having these tools ultimately just help to empower, each of those employees in their position, gives them accountability. That's job satisfaction. Obviously, everybody works for money, but people want the value of knowing that their job is theirs, that they've accomplished something. That goes so far, for people. And as business owners, if we're not giving that to our employees, they're not going to be with us, right? They're not part of that overall mission. And so as one of our last workbook activities, we want everybody to go through and identify one or two ways that they can empower each of the employees in their organization. I still think it's important that the business owner takes time going through each of the positions in their organization and identify one or two things that they can do to really empower and make sure that their employees have ownership over that position.
Love it. And I would encourage them as well to identify some KPIs that they may be able to. You may feel like you need to own that certain KPI, but I would challenge you to hand that KPI off to somebody else, empower them, and then just make it your responsibility to follow up with them. I think they could really take this workbook challenge and this activity in any way that they would like there, but to really ask themselves, where can they pass things off to other team members where they can then take ownership over their job?